The alarm bells rang loud across Station Nexus. Red lights flashed in every hallway of the Galactic Defense Academy. Students from many different planets ran to their rooms. Teachers shouted orders. But Security Chief Vexthon had the biggest problem of all. 3 young Cathara had escaped from the science wing. Vexthon was 8 feet tall with green scales and sharp teeth. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought space pirates and stopped rebellions. But right now, he was scared. The 3 creatures in front of him were only 4 feet tall, but they were the most dangerous things he had ever seen. The Cathara cubs moved like shadows. They had black fur with silver spots. Their claws were as long as knives. Their yellow eyes could see in the dark. They came from a planet where everything tried to kill everything else. Even as babies, they were perfect hunters. The cubs ran through the main hallway like it was a game. They jumped from wall to wall. They climbed on the ceiling. When security guards tried to catch them, the cubs were too fast. When the guards used stun weapons, the cubs dodged every shot. Team Alpha, move left. Vexthon spoke into his radio. Team Beta, block the east exit. His best guards wore heavy armor. They carried energy shields and sleep gas. But none of it worked. The cubs seemed to know what the guards would do before they did it. They moved as one group, like they could read each other's minds. One cub jumped over a guard's head. Another slid under a containment field. The third one made a sound like laughing. Students who were still in the hallway screamed and ran away. Even the teachers looked afraid. "Sir, they're heading toward the cafeteria," a guard reported. "There are still students there." Vexthon felt cold fear in his stomach. If the cubs reached the cafeteria, people would get hurt, maybe killed. The cubs weren't trying to hurt anyone yet, but they were young predators in a strange place. That made them very dangerous. "Use the heavy stunners," he ordered. "I don't care if it hurts them." The guards raised their biggest weapons. These stunners could knock out a full-grown warrior. But before they could fire, something strange happened. A human student walked around the corner. His name was Jake Miller. He was 20 years old with brown hair and blue eyes. He looked very ordinary compared to the aliens around him. He was smaller than most students at the academy. He wore the same gray uniform as everyone else, but he did something no one expected. He stopped walking and watched the cubs. "Student, get back!" Vexthon shouted. "This area is dangerous." But Jake didn't move. He stood there like he was watching an interesting show. The cubs noticed him too. They stopped their wild running and turned to look at the human. For a moment, everything was quiet. The cubs stood perfectly still, their heads tilted to one side like curious animals. Jake tilted his head the same way. "He's going to get killed," whispered Dr. Zirian. She was the Academy's expert on alien minds. She had studied hundreds of different species, but she had never seen anything like this. The largest cub took a step toward Jake. Its claws clicked on the metal floor. Its muscles were ready to spring. Every guard raised their weapon. Then Jake did something that shocked everyone. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't fake or forced. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they see something that makes them happy. Like watching puppies play or seeing an old friend. The cubs stopped moving. They looked confused. In their world, showing teeth meant aggression. It meant a challenge to fight. But this human's smile felt different. It felt warm and safe. "What is he doing?" Vexthon asked. "That's a threat display. The cubs will attack." But Dr. Zirian was watching more carefully. "No," she said slowly. "Look at their body language. They're not preparing to attack. They're curious." The cubs moved closer to Jake. But they moved carefully now, not like hunters stalking prey. They moved like young animals meeting someone new. Their claws went back into their paws. Their muscles relaxed. Jake's smile got a little bigger. He made a soft sound, almost like humming. The sound seemed to calm the cubs even more. "Someone stop this," Vexthon said. "The human doesn't understand what he's dealing with." But no one moved. Everyone was watching something that should have been impossible. 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators were acting like gentle house pets around a human student. The security teams kept their weapons ready. The teachers held their breath. and Jake Miller stood in the middle of it all, smiling at 3 alien cubs like they were the most natural thing in the world. The cubs made soft chirping sounds. They were talking to each other in their own language. But their voices weren't angry or scared anymore. They sounded almost playful. Jake took a small step forward. The guards tensed, but the cubs didn't attack. Instead, they sat down. They were still watching Jake, but now they looked like students waiting for a teacher to speak. "Impossible," Dr. Zirian whispered. "No species has ever made peaceful contact with juvenile Cathara. They're too aggressive, too territorial." But Jake Miller from Earth was proving that impossible things could happen. With nothing but a smile and a gentle voice, he had done what 30 armed guards could not do. He had made the predator cubs stop and listen. Security Chief Vexthon watched in horror as the human student moved closer to the 3 deadly cubs. Every instinct told him to order his guards to fire their weapons. But something made him wait. Jake Miller looked at the cubs like they were just regular animals. He moved slowly and kept his hands where they could see them. The cubs watched every step he took. Their yellow eyes followed his movements, but they didn't seem afraid or angry. "You're very fast," Jake said to them in a quiet voice. "I saw how you jumped from the walls. That was amazing." The cubs made soft clicking sounds. They tilted their heads when Jake spoke like they were trying to understand his words. Dr. Zirian grabbed Vexthon's arm. "He's talking to them like they're intelligent beings, not dangerous animals." "They are dangerous animals," Vexthon replied. "The human is going to get himself killed." But Jake kept talking in his calm voice. "You must be scared. This place is very different from your home. Everything smells strange here." The largest cub made a low humming sound. It almost sounded sad. The other 2 cubs moved closer to their brother. They touched him with their paws like they were trying to comfort him. Jake sat down on the floor. This made him much smaller than the cubs. In the language of predators, sitting down meant he was not a threat. The cubs seemed to understand this. They relaxed even more. "My name is Jake," he said. "I come from a planet called Earth. When I first came here, I was scared too. Everything was so different." The guards looked at each other with confusion. In all their training, no one had taught them to sit on the floor and have conversations with dangerous creatures. Their weapons were designed to hurt or capture. Their armor was made to protect against claws and teeth, but Jake wore no armor and carried no weapons. He had only his voice and his smile. "I bet you're hungry," Jake continued. "Growing up makes you hungry all the time. I remember when I was your age. I was always looking for food." One of the smaller cubs made a chirping sound. It almost sounded like agreement. The cub looked at its stomach and then back at Jake. "He's reading their emotional state," Dr. Zirian whispered. "He's recognizing their behavior patterns." Vexthon frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look at how they're acting." "They're not hunting or fighting. They're displaying stress behaviors. They're young animals in a strange place and they're scared." As if to prove her point, the largest cub made a sound that was almost like a whine. It was the sound a lost child might make when looking for its mother. Jake heard it too. His smile became even warmer. "You miss your family, don't you? That's okay. Missing people you love is normal." The cub took a step closer to Jake, then another step. The guards raised their weapons, but Vexthon held up his hand to stop them. "Wait," he said. "Let's see what happens." The cub was now close enough to touch Jake. Its claws could cut through steel. Its teeth could bite through bone. But it just stood there looking down at the human who sat on the floor. Jake slowly raised his hand. He moved it very carefully like he was approaching a nervous horse. The cub watched his hand but didn't back away. "It's okay," Jake said softly. "I won't hurt you." He let his hand rest in the air, palm up. It was an invitation, not a demand. The cub could choose what to do next. For a long moment, nothing happened. The hallway was completely silent except for the sound of breathing. Even the alarm bells had stopped ringing. Then the cub did something that made everyone gasp. It gently placed one large paw on Jake's open hand. The paw was bigger than Jake's entire hand. The claws were sharp enough to cut through his skin like paper, but the cub was very careful. It touched Jake like it was shaking hands with a new friend. "Hello there," Jake said with a big smile. "It's nice to meet you." The cub made a sound that was almost like purring. The other 2 cubs moved closer. They wanted to meet Jake, too. "This is impossible," one of the guards said. "Cathara cubs don't bond with other species. They don't trust anyone except their own pack. But Jake was proving that impossible things could happen. He slowly stood up, keeping his hand connected to the cub's paw. The cubs stood up with him. They looked like they were dancing together. "You know what?" Jake said to all three cubs. "I think you want to go home. Not to your planet, but to your room here. Your safe place where your food is." The cubs looked at each other. They made more clicking sounds like they were having a conversation. Then they looked back at Jake and made different sounds. These sounds were softer, more trusting. Jake started walking toward the science wing. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you something to eat." The three cubs followed him. They walked beside him like they were his pets. The most dangerous predators in the galaxy were following a human student through the hallways of the academy. "Should we follow them?" asked one of the guards. "Yes," said Vexthon. "But keep your distance. And keep your weapons ready." The group moved slowly through the academy. Students and teachers who saw them couldn't believe their eyes. The human was leading the cubs like a shepherd leading sheep. Dr. Zirian walked behind them, taking notes on her datapad. "This changes everything we know about interspecies contact," she said. "The human isn't using dominance or fear. He's using empathy and understanding." Jake talked to the cubs as they walked. He told them about the academy and the different students who lived there. He pointed out interesting things they passed. The cubs listened to every word like they understood what he was saying. When they reached the science wing, Jake stopped at the door to the cubs' habitat. "This is your home here," he said. "You'll be safe inside." The largest cub looked at the door, then back at Jake. It made a questioning sound. "I'll come visit you tomorrow," Jake promised. "We can talk more then." The cub seemed to understand. It touched Jake's hand one more time with its paw. Then all three cubs walked into their habitat. Jake closed the door gently behind them. When he turned around, he saw dozens of people staring at him. Guards, teachers, and students had all followed to watch. "How did you do that?" Vexthon asked. Jake looked surprised by the question. "Do what?" "I just talked to them like anyone else. They seemed lonely and scared, so I tried to help." "But they're dangerous predators," Dr. Zirian said. Jake shrugged. "They're also just kids far from home. Everyone gets scared sometimes." The next morning, Jake Miller walked to the science wing before his first class. He had promised the cubs he would visit them, and he always kept his promises. When he reached their habitat, he found Dr. Zirian already there, watching the cubs through the observation window. "They've been restless all night," she said when Jake joined her. "They keep looking at the door like they're waiting for something." Jake looked through the window. The three cubs were sitting near the door, exactly like dogs waiting for their owner to come home. When they saw Jake, they jumped up and made excited chirping sounds. "They're waiting for you," Dr. Zirian said with amazement. "In all my years studying alien behavior, I've never seen Cathera cubs bond with another species." Jake smiled and waved at the cubs. "Can I go inside?" "Absolutely not," said a stern voice behind them. Security Chief Vexthon walked up with two guards. "That habitat is restricted. Those creatures are too dangerous for close contact." "But they were fine yesterday," Jake said. "They didn't hurt anyone." "Yesterday was luck," Vexthon replied. "Today might be different. Predators are unpredictable." Jake looked at the cubs again. They had moved to the window and were pressing their paws against the glass. They looked sad and confused. One of them made a low whining sound. "They don't look dangerous to me," Jake said. "They look lonely." Dr. Zirian was studying her datapad. "Actually, their behavior patterns are very interesting." "Jake, where did you grow up?" "On a ranch in Montana," Jake answered. "My family raised cattle and horses. We had lots of different animals." "That explains a lot," Dr. Zirian said. "You understand animal behavior because you grew up around animals. You know how to read their body language and emotions." Vexthon frowned. "These aren't farm animals. They're apex predators from a death world." "But they're still social creatures," Jake said. "Yesterday, when they were running around the academy, they weren't really attacking anyone. They were playing. It was like a game of tag." Dr. Zirian looked up from her notes. "You're right. I've been reviewing the security footage. The cubs never actually tried to hurt anyone. They avoided the guards instead of fighting them. Because they were scared," Jake added. "When animals are scared in a new place, they either hide or they try to show they're not weak. The cubs were showing they were strong and fast, so no one would hurt them." "That's a very sophisticated understanding of animal psychology," Dr. Zirian said. Most species in the galaxy see predator behavior as simply aggressive or non-aggressive. You're seeing the emotions behind the behavior. Jake shrugged. My dad always said animals are a lot like people. They get scared, they get lonely, they want to feel safe. You just have to pay attention to what they're really trying to tell you. One of the cubs started scratching at the door. The other two joined in. They weren't trying to break out. They were asking to be let out like dogs asking to go for a walk. Look at that, Jake said. They're asking permission instead of trying to escape. That's what smart animals do when they trust someone. Vexthon looked at the security monitors. The containment field is holding. They could probably break through it if they really wanted to escape, but they're not trying. Because they don't want to escape, Jake said. They want to visit. There's a difference. Dr. Zirian made more notes. This is remarkable. Jake, your species seems to have evolved a unique form of emotional intelligence. Most galactic species evolved as either prey animals or solitary predators. Humans evolved as pack hunters who learned to work with other species. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means your brain is wired to understand and cooperate with other species in ways that most aliens can't. When Vexthon sees the cubs, his prey animal instincts make him see them as threats. When you see them, your pack hunting instincts make you see them as potential allies. Jake looked through the window again. The largest cub was making hand gestures like it was trying to talk without words. I think he wants to show me something, Jake said. Absolutely not, Vexthon said firmly. You're not going in there. But Dr. Zirian looked thoughtful. Actually, this could be a valuable research opportunity. Jake, would you be willing to interact with the cubs under controlled conditions, with full safety protocols? What kind of safety protocols? Vexthon demanded. Emergency containment fields, sedative gas systems, armed guards outside the habitat. If anything goes wrong, we can stop it immediately. Jake looked at the cubs. They had given up scratching at the door and were now sitting sadly by the window. They just want to make friends, he said. Back home, when we got new animals, they always acted like this until they felt comfortable. These aren't farm animals, Vexthon repeated. No, Jake agreed. They're smarter than farm animals. That makes them easier to work with, not harder. Smart animals understand rules and relationships. Dr. Zirian was already making plans. We could set up a controlled meeting in the large observation room. Full monitoring, emergency systems ready, but enough space for natural interaction. This is insane, Vexthon said. This is science, Dr. Zirian replied. Jake has made contact with a species that no one in the galaxy has ever successfully communicated with. We need to understand how and why. Jake pressed his hand against the window. The largest cub pressed his paw against the same spot on the other side. For a moment it looked like they were holding hands through the glass. I grew up with animals that could kill me if they wanted to, Jake said quietly. Bulls, stallions, guard dogs. But they never hurt me because I treated them with respect. I never tried to dominate them or scare them. I just tried to understand what they needed. And what do these cubs need? Dr. Zirian asked. Jake watched the three young aliens for a long moment. They need to know they're safe. They need to know someone cares about them. They need to feel like they belong somewhere. That's what all young creatures need, Dr. Zirian said softly. But you're the first person to recognize that these cubs are still just children, despite being deadly predators. Vexthon looked at his security monitors again. Other students were starting to gather outside the habitat. Word was spreading through the academy about the human who could talk to the dangerous cubs. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it my way. Full security, all precautions, Jake smiled. That's fine. I just want to help them feel less lonely. The cubs seemed to sense that something was about to change. They made excited chirping sounds and began pacing around their habitat. For the first time since arriving at the academy, they looked happy. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Zirian decided. We'll set up the controlled meeting tomorrow morning. Jake nodded and waved goodbye to the cubs. As he walked away, he could hear them making soft calling sounds, like they were saying goodbye too. Behind him, Dr. Zirian and Vexthon looked at each other with the same thought. Everything they knew about dangerous species was about to change. News of Jake's success with the Cathera cubs spread through the academy like wildfire. By the time he walked to his morning classes, groups of students were staring at him and whispering. Some looked amazed. Others looked scared. A few looked like they thought he was crazy. In his xenobiology class, Professor Kelmar, a tall blue alien with 4 arms, spent the entire hour asking Jake questions about his interaction with the cubs. The other students listened in fascination as Jake explained his approach. You treated them like intelligent beings rather than animals, Professor Kelmar said. That's very unusual. Most species in the galaxy divide other creatures into 3 categories: prey, predator, or neutral. You seem to have a 4th category, potential friend. I don't really think about it that way, Jake said. Back home we had this old dog named Rex. He was huge and had scars from fighting coyotes. Everyone in town was afraid of him. But when I sat down and talked to him, he just wanted someone to pet his ears and tell him he was a good boy. A student from the planet Xerion raised her hand. But how do you know when a creature is safe to approach? Our training teaches us to identify threat levels immediately. I guess I look for different things, Jake said. I watch their eyes and their body language. Scared animals act different than angry animals. Lonely animals act different than hungry animals. The cubs weren't trying to hurt anyone yesterday. They were just confused and scared. Professor Kelmar made notes on his datapad. This is a fundamentally different approach to xenobiology. Jake, would you be willing to participate in some tests? We'd like to understand how human perception differs from other species. Sure, Jake said. But can I ask something? Why is everyone so surprised that the cubs are friendly? They're just kids. The classroom fell silent. Finally, a student from the reptilian Zarek species spoke up. Because Kithera are apex predators. In our world, apex predators are always dangerous. You don't make friends with them. You either run away or fight them. But that's not true for all predators, Jake said. On Earth, we have animals called wolves. They're apex predators too. But thousands of years ago, some humans made friends with them. Now we call them dogs, and they're our best companions. Professor Kelmar's 4 eyes went wide. Are you saying humans domesticated apex predators? We didn't domesticate them exactly. We made partnerships with them. They helped us hunt and we shared our food with them. Both species benefited. The Xerion student looked confused. But how did you know which wolves to approach? How did you know they wouldn't kill you? Jake thought about this carefully. I think my ancestors were good at reading animal emotions. They could tell which wolves were angry and which ones were just curious. They probably started by feeding the curious ones and avoiding the angry ones. That requires incredible emotional intelligence, Professor Kelmar said, and enormous risk tolerance. Most species would never take such chances. After class, Jake walked to the science wing for his scheduled meeting with the cubs. He found Dr. Xerion and Security Chief Vexthan waiting for him in the observation room. The room had been modified with new safety equipment, emergency force fields, sedative gas dispensers, and armed guards positioned at every exit. We've been monitoring the cubs all morning, Dr. Xerion said. They've been restless and vocal. I think they know you're coming. Through the window, Jake could see the 3 cubs pacing excitedly around their habitat. When they saw him, they made happy chirping sounds and pressed against the glass. The safety protocols are all active, Vexthan said. At the first sign of aggression, we'll activate the containment fields. They won't be aggressive, Jake said confidently. Look at their body language. Their tails are up. Their ears are forward. They're making happy sounds. Those are all signs of friendly excitement. How can you be so sure? Vexthan asked. Because I understand what they're feeling. They're excited to see a friend. It's the same way my dog acted when I came home from school. Dr. Xerion opened the habitat door. The cubs immediately ran toward Jake, but they stopped a few feet away. They remembered the rules from yesterday. Approach slowly and wait for permission. Hello again, Jake said with a warm smile. Did you sleep well? The largest cub made a sound that seemed like an answer. It approached Jake carefully and gently touched his hand with its paw, just like the day before. This is extraordinary, Dr. Xerion whispered to her recording device. The cubs are showing learned behavior. They've adapted their natural instincts to follow human social rules. Jake sat down on the floor and all 3 cubs sat down with him. They formed a circle like friends having a conversation. You know what I think? Jake said to the cubs. I think you're not just smart, you're really smart. Smart enough to learn new things and make new friends. One of the smaller cubs made a questioning sound and tilted its head. I think you're asking me something, Jake said. Are you asking about my home? About where I come from? The cub made the same sound again and nodded its head. Oh my stars, Dr. Xerion breathed. It's actually trying to communicate. It's asking questions. Jake spent the next hour telling the cubs about Earth. He described mountains and oceans, forests and cities. He told them about different animals and how they lived together. The cubs listened to every word, making sounds that seemed like questions or comments. When Jake described dogs, the cubs became very excited. They seemed to understand that dogs were predators who had become friends with humans. "I think they want to be like dogs," Jake told Dr. Zirian. "They want to be predators who are also friends." "That's impossible," Vexthon said from outside the habitat. "Kythera are too dangerous to domesticate." But as he watched, he saw something that challenged everything he believed. The three cubs were playing gently with Jake, being very careful not to hurt him with their claws. They had learned to control their strength around their human friend. "They're self-regulating their behavior," Dr. Zirian observed. "They're instinctively understanding that Jake is more fragile than they are, and they're adjusting their interactions accordingly." When it was time for Jake to leave, the cubs walked him to the door. The largest one touched his hand one more time, then made a sound that seemed like, "Goodbye." "I'll come back tomorrow," Jake promised. "We can talk more then." As Jake left the habitat, Dr. Zirian turned to Vexthon. "We need to contact the Galactic Council," she said. "This changes everything we know about interspecies relations." "What do you mean?" "I mean that humans may be the key to peaceful contact with dozens of species we've classified as too dangerous to approach." Jake's not just communicating with the cubs. He's forming emotional bonds with them. He's creating trust where we thought trust was impossible. Vex then looked back at the cubs, who were still watching the door where Jake had left. "You're saying humans have abilities that other species don't have?" "I'm saying humans have abilities that other species have never needed to develop. Most of us evolved as either hunters or prey. Humans evolved as social hunters who learned to cooperate across species lines. That makes them uniquely qualified for interspecies diplomacy." That evening, Jake sat in his room writing a letter to his parents back on Earth. He told them about the cubs and how homesick they seemed. He wrote, "They remind me of Rex when we first got him. Scary on the outside, but really just wanting to belong somewhere. I think they're going to be great friends." He had no idea that his simple act of kindness was about to change the entire galaxy's approach to first contact with new species. He only knew that 3 young aliens were a little less lonely than they had been before, and that seemed like the most important thing in the world. 3 months later, Jake Miller walked through the halls of the Galactic Defense Academy with a very different reputation than when he had arrived. Students no longer stared at him because he was the human who had done the impossible. They stared at him because he was the person who had changed everything. The Academy looked different too. Where once there had been signs warning about dangerous alien species, now there were notices about cultural sensitivity training and emotional intelligence workshops. The harsh military atmosphere had softened into something more welcoming. Jake carried a data pad as he walked to his new office. Yes, his own office. At 20 years old, he had become the Academy's first interspecies relations specialist. It was a job that hadn't existed before Jake proved it was necessary. His first stop was the expanded xenobiology wing. Where once there had been one small habitat for dangerous species, now there were multiple large enclosures designed for comfort rather than containment. And in the largest habitat, 3 Kythera cubs who had grown noticeably bigger and happier lived in what looked more like a home than a prison. "Good morning, guys," Jake called to them as he approached their habitat. The cubs, now the size of large dogs, bounded over to greet him. They made their happy chirping sounds and pressed against the transparent wall, but they didn't scratch or demand to be let out. They had learned that Jake would visit them properly during scheduled interaction times. "They've been perfect students," said Dr. Zirian, who now worked as Jake's research partner. "Not a single aggressive incident in 3 months. They follow rules, they communicate clearly, and they've even started helping with other difficult cases." "Other cases?" Jake asked. Dr. Zirian smiled. "Come see for yourself." She led him to a smaller habitat where a young creature that looked like a cross between a bear and an octopus sat quietly in a corner. It had arrived at the Academy just 2 weeks ago, brought by diplomats who couldn't handle its violent outbursts. "This is a mollusk cub from the Spiral Nebula," Dr. Zirian explained. "Its species has never had peaceful contact with outsiders. The diplomats were ready to send it back as too dangerous to study." Jake looked at the young alien. It was about the size of a human child with soft purple fur and large, sad eyes. "What changed their minds?" Your friends, Dr. Zirian said, pointing to the Cathara habitat. Jake watched in amazement as the 3 Cathara cubs approached the wall between their habitat and the mollusks. They made soft, gentle sounds. The mollusk looked up and made similar sounds back. Slowly, carefully it approached the wall. They're teaching it, Jake said with wonder. The Cathara are showing the new cub how to behave around friendly people. Exactly. They've become ambassadors for their own species and others. We've had 6 difficult cases in the past month, and the Cathara cubs have helped calm all of them. Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. They've found their purpose. They're not just predators anymore, they're helpers. Security Chief Vexthon appeared beside them. He looked much more relaxed than he had 3 months ago. Jake, the council representatives want to see you in Conference Room Alpha. The morning briefing is about to start. Jake nodded and followed Vexthon through the academy halls. Students from dozens of different species greeted him as he passed. Many of them were enrolled in the new human methods classes that had been added to the curriculum. Conference Room Alpha was filled with some of the most important people in the galaxy. Representatives from the Galactic Council, military leaders, diplomats, and scientists all sat around a large table. At the head of the table was Admiral Corzon, a distinguished officer from the Centauri system. Cadet Miller, Admiral Corzon said as Jake entered the room. Please take a seat, we have much to discuss. Jake sat down, feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. Is this about the cubs? Are they in trouble? Quite the opposite, Admiral Corzon replied. Thanks to your work with the Cathara cubs, we've had breakthrough communications with 17 species that were previously considered too dangerous for contact. The diplomatic implications are enormous. A blue-skinned representative from the Andromeda Council leaned forward. Jake, your methods have been studied by our best scientists. We believe humans have a unique ability for emotional intelligence that could revolutionize how we handle first contact situations. I don't understand, Jake said. I just treated them like I would treat any scared animal. That's exactly the point, said Dr. Zirian, who had joined the meeting. Most species in the galaxy see other creatures as threats to be avoided or enemies to be defeated. Humans see them as individuals to be understood. Admiral Corzon activated a holographic display showing a star map. We'd like to offer you a position on the deep space exploration ship UCS Discovery. Your job would be to help establish peaceful contact with new species we encounter. Jake looked at the star map with excitement. You mean I'd get to meet aliens that no one has ever talked to before? Exactly. But it would be dangerous work. Not all species will be as receptive as the Cathara cubs. Some might be truly hostile. Jake thought about the cubs and how scared they had been when they first arrived. Everyone gets scared when they meet someone new. Maybe the hostile ones are just scared too. The alien representatives looked at each other with amazement. Even facing potentially deadly situations, the human's first instinct was to empathize rather than prepare for battle. There's something else, Admiral Corzon said. The Kuthra homeworld has requested direct diplomatic contact with Earth. They want to establish formal relations based on what their cubs have learned here. Jake's eyes went wide. Really? The cubs' families want to meet humans? More than that. They want to send more cubs to learn from us. And they want to learn our methods for raising young predators to be both strong and peaceful. Dr. Zirian smiled. Jake, you didn't just make friends with 3 alien cubs. You've started the first, truly peaceful relationship between humans and one of the galaxy's most powerful predator species. When do I leave for the Discovery? Jake asked. In 2 weeks, Admiral Corzon replied. But first you'll need to train a team of other humans in your methods. We're establishing a new branch of the military, the Diplomatic Contact Corps. After the meeting, Jake walked back to visit the cubs one more time. When he told them about his new assignment, they made excited sounds and gestured toward the stars visible through the observation windows. You want to explore space too, Jake said with understanding. Maybe someday when you're older you can come with me. The largest cub touched Jake's hand with its paw and made a sound that clearly meant promise. I promise, Jake said. That evening, Jake sat in his room writing another letter to his parents. He wrote, Remember how you always said that treating others with kindness was the most important thing? Well, it turns out that applies to aliens too. I'm going to spend my life helping different species become friends with each other. I think it's what I was meant to do. As he sealed the letter, Jake looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there were species that no human had ever met. Some might be dangerous, some might be scared, some might be lonely. But Jake knew that with patience, understanding, and a genuine smile, almost anyone could become a friend. The 3 Catharicubs had taught him that predators could be gentle, that dangerous creatures could be loving, and that fear could be overcome with kindness. Now he was going to teach the galaxy that humans had something special to offer, the belief that everyone, no matter how different or scary they seemed, deserved a chance to be understood. In their habitat, the 3 cubs settled down for sleep. They dreamed of their home planet and the day they would return there as ambassadors of peace. They dreamed of Jake exploring distant stars and making new friends among the countless species of the galaxy. And in the morning, when Jake came to visit them before leaving for his new assignment, they would touch his hand with their paws one more time and make the sound that meant, "Thank you for showing us how to be both strong and kind." The human, who had smiled at 3 scared predator cubs, had changed the galaxy forever, not through force or technology, but through something much more powerful. The simple understanding that everyone, even the scariest creatures in the universe, just wanted to feel like they belonged somewhere, and that was a very human thing to understand.